cards, and there are a few of you who I don't have addresses for, and so I'm going to be private messaging you in the chat. If you can provide your mailing address. And so again, the timing with this is it's probably going to go out maybe on Friday or Monday. And so you need to be at whatever address you're providing to me, maybe a week after Monday, like from the time period of now between now and a week from Monday. Okay.
Okay. So you're all good, Wes? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So you guys can all see the slideshow now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, thank you. All right. So first of all, I just want to say, please, please, please ask questions. I want this to be like it's not gonna be a full-on conversation. I'm definitely gonna be talking for a lot. But don't be afraid to interrupt me. Literally just unmute, go for it. I want you guys to feel comfortable asking questions. Because I think I'm doing a good job, but who knows? Maybe I'm just completely off. So I just want to preface it. Please ask questions. All right. So starting off on the actual stuff, on the actual content, web development, if you have any idea of what goes on, you probably heard of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are going to be the building blocks for any website that you are trying to develop. So first of all, I'll start off by explaining what HTML is. So pretty much HTML is hypertext markup language. That's not that important, but it's just used to make the actual structure of a web page. So if you want to have the title of your web page, if you want to display an image in your web page, you're going to have to write something in HTML in order to do that. And then CSS is called cascading style sheets, which is also not that important. But basically, this is going to be how you're going to style your HTML elements. We'll get more into this, of course. I just wanted to give a brief explanation. So like, let's say I have this title, but I want to center it in the middle of my page and I want to make it have blue text. You would do that using CSS. And then JavaScript allows you to have a dynamic web page. So if you want to make it so you click the button and something on your page changes based on some outcome, or based on some input, things like that, you're going to use JavaScript in order to do this. This is going to be like the real coding portion, I guess you would say, that you're more used to if you've done like C++ or Python or something like that, because it's going to be you're actually kind of taking in some sort of input and then making some sort of change based on that input. So first of all, HTML is probably going to be the most important to learn, just to understand, as it is the building block of an HTML file, which is used to display a web page. And so as we see right here, we have this P and then hello world. The P is just an example of a really basic element called a paragraph. And then these elements are shown in code using tags. I will show example code, so don't worry if you want to actually see it in real example. I'll be showing a lot of example code during this. And then each element has an opening tag and a closing tag. And we can see that here that the opening tag has the name of whatever it is. So we have the P, and then we have the hello world, and then a /P, and that signifies a closing tag. So the most important element probably in HTML is going to be a div. You can think of this as kind of like a container. And I actually wanted to go to google.com to kind of show you guys how it really looks and how it really breaks down, because this will give you a real good conceptual understanding of how HTML works. Okay. All right. So if we go to google.com, and you can do this yourself if you'd like to, just to follow me along. And we go to inspect. This is going to pull up this random gibberish. I know you're not going to understand anything of what it means, but this really just shows you how the website is actually built. So pretty much, I wanted you guys to navigate to this div right here. Think of a div as a container. It stores some part of the web page. And so if we look, I'm hovering over the div right here. And then it's highlighting in the blue on my actual web page what the div is. So this div is pretty much the entirety of this web page. Now, if I open up this div, you can then go and break down all the divs inside of it. So we can see that an HTML file is made up of a bunch of divs, one to show the whole file, and then it has a bunch of divs inside it. So we have this div up here, and we can see that it has a certain name, and then it stores a certain part of our web page. And then we can go to another div, it shows another part of our web page, another div, it shows another part of our web page. Does this make sense? Does everybody understand kind of how the whole div thing works and it compartmentalizing a website?
Hey Ryan, I had a
Okay.
quick question. What did you click on that
Yeah.
you brought that little thing?
Yeah, of course. So if you're on your browser, I just right click, and I'm on a Mac, by the way. I forget what it is on
I'm on Mac too.
Windows. Okay, yeah. But if you right click on the page and click inspect, then it opens up this left side, and if you go to the elements tab at the top right here, there's going to be a bunch of tabs. But if you go to the elements tab at the top, then you can kind of see how it all breaks down. And then I wanted you guys to look in this specific div with the class name L3EUGB, because this is kind of just where it shows all the actual building blocks of this website. Okay, you good?
Thank you. Gotcha.
Yeah. All right, so returning to the slideshow. Yeah, so pretty much the div is going to be like the building block of any HTML document. And now I just want to go over the concept of building a basic website. You're going to have a div that holds your page, and then that div will contain other divs inside of it that kind of break up your page and allow you to just compartmentalize and separate everything into modules. So now I'm actually going to go to my code to try to show you guys a real example and how it looks. So I have uploaded this code, by the way, to the GitHub that I shared with you guys. So if you want to have it for yourself, you can go ahead and check that out. But this is just what I have for this specific example. So this example, I'm just going to uncomment it, is exactly what I have in the slide. So pretty much I'm going to run, I'm going to run npm start to start up my page using React, just like I instructed you guys to. And we'll see that loading up. And then, okay. And then, sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. Oops. Oops, sorry, I'm having a little problem here. Sorry, I'm getting a little error. I'm not exactly sure why. But I guess I'll just keep explaining. So when we're in our actual code, basically this div is the outside container. And then we're going to have a couple inside containers, one for our right side and then one for our left side. Now you'll see I'm using this class name right here. This class name is just going to be for our CSS. So if you guys remember when I was explaining earlier, the CSS is just how we're going to style it. So if I want to be able to show on the right side versus the left side, we have to style it in a certain way. So let me just, not exactly sure why this isn't running. Of course, this happens the one time when I'm actually teaching. Let me just try to figure this out.
This is just my guess. Do you have to like save your file first because you just uncomment it and then rerun it?
Oh shoot, that is a very smart. Wow. I guess you should probably be teaching this, because if I'm making a mistake like that, then I don't know what I'm doing. All right, let's try it. npm start again, and then Should this work? There we go. Okay. Thank you for solving my problem for me. Okay.
Ryan, if I can
All right.
interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Jose, Fallon, and Anu, can you guys take a look at the chat, please?
All right. Now that's taken care of. Thank you, Diana. So basically, this is how it looks when we have no CSS on it. So right now, if I inspect, we can go in here and see we have a div with class container, just like was in my code, which I can show right here. We have our div with class name container, and then we have our right side and our left side. So then basically when I apply the CSS, which I have in a separate CSS file, let me see over here. Well, I accidentally got it backwards, but this is how the CSS is applied. And we'll get more into this later, but it just kind of shows you how the HTML breaks down by using divs, and then you use CSS to actually style it. When we use no CSS to style it, it basically just goes in a block level fashion. So if we keep looking, we just have right side because it was listed first in the document, and that fills the whole width of our document. And then left side, which goes second, and that fills the whole width of our document. But it's actually the CSS that allows you to kind of move things around and have the layout that you'd like. So now I can return back to slides. Okay. So now I'm going to go through some of the most common HTML elements. So we went over the div and then the paragraph element briefly, but there's a lot more common ones that you'll see a lot. So if I go to my other example, let's see. All right. Okay. So now, oops, let me add the CSS for it. All right. Okay. So if we go ahead and inspect again, so I've written all this code. We can see we have a bunch of different elements in here. And then these are going to be a lot of commonly used ones. So pretty much, we have H1, H2, H3, H4. These are just going to be a bunch of different headers. So you can just use these if you want a different size. So like usually the main title of the page is going to be H1, and then a smaller maybe subtitle H2, and then you can kind of go from there, choose how you'd like. And then this is just going to be our basic paragraph. And then we have this BR element is just a break element, and it's just going to be used to kind of create a little bit of space. And then we have a button over here, and then I just made it so it says hello in the console. We can just see there's the hello right here. But you can do a lot of different things. And then there's also a anchor. So right here we have an A element, which is an anchor. And this is how you're going to link to either another page or a different element within your page. So first of all, if I wanted to link to another page, I made it so it links to the UCLA website. I click it, and then what do you know? We're on the new UCLA website, and we have a new chancellor. Wow, that's news to me. And also, you can link to another element within your own site. So if we go back to my code over here, we can see that I have, so we have our A href, and then that goes to ucla.edu. But then we also have A href equals hashtag hello. So this hashtag hello pretty much just means that it's linking to another ID, and that's going to be also CSS, which I'll get into later, which is how we're going to link to another spot in our page. So the way that I have my code written right now, we have a bunch of stuff, and then we have this big div block to create some space. And then I have something with the ID hello. Now, if I want to click this anchor and I say go to hello, it just goes all the way down to my page to hello. And I included a picture of a puppy because puppies are cute. So yeah. So pretty much the anchor is going to link to this hello because it has the ID of hello. And that's how you would use an anchor to link to something else in your page. I just want to stop. Do we have any questions? Do you want me to go more in depth, talk less? We all good?
Or for the inspects, where is the
Mhm.
CSS file?
The CSS file, so pretty much how it works is, and I'm still not too sure on it, because it does get kind of confusing. But if you go down here, and then you can kind of click on like different parts. So yeah, if we see right here, you can go to, like, if I click on H1, we see how it's highlighted right here. I just clicked on H1. Then if you go down here and you see this styles button, then it shows you like this H1 has this styling. And the thing about HTML is that it has some default CSS because how else would it get styled? And I haven't done any styling on these, but yeah. So here, let me go to something where I have styling, because I want to make sure that it. Okay, yeah. So if we see this hello, I have in my file. I'll go back to my CSS file. I have this where it says hashtag hello because I want to target the ID of hello, and it says color red. Then we go back to our inspect, and then if you just click on the paragraph that has the ID hello, then it shows you all the CSS on it in this styles. And then you can see here, it also shows you the file that it came from. So we see that it says app.css:42. That just means that it comes from my app.css file. And then the 42 is whichever line it's in. So we can see it's in line 42, matches up perfectly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else before we move on to the next?
I
Okay.
did
yeah.
hear this was actually a thing. Couldn't you,
Mhm.
let's say you didn't actually want to create a CSS file. Is
Mhm.
it possible that you can nest like CSS elements in an HTML page? Like,
Yes.
like CSS color red or something.
Yes. So I was actually gonna touch on that later when I was gonna fully go over CSS. But you can do a thing called inline styling. So when you're writing your HTML elements, let's say you just want to do one really quick thing. So like color red, like you said, you could easily just have color red in your HTML line, but I'll give that an example later. But yes, you are right. It's just more of convention and it keeps it more organized to have a separate CSS file, just for it to be. You'll notice with coding a lot of the time, everybody likes everything very modular and separated, so it's just easy to kind of navigate through. So we just have our CSS files separately, just for the sake of the easiness to read. That's what I'd say. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then also, by the way, there is, or here, let me go to this actually. Yeah, I was just gonna touch on this. Definitely when you're in web development, I want you to use the tools that are available to you. So whether it's just the internet, going on a website that has a bunch of information on HTML elements, or now, of course, one of the big topics is AI. These things definitely can help you. However, they also can harm your learning. So if you really want to be able to learn this stuff, you can really get a lot of help from AI. However, AI can also kind of ruin your learning experience because you can just ask it to do these really simple tasks for you, and you won't actually learn how it works. And this is all great for really low level tasks, like if you're not trying to be an engineer, but once you get into the more serious things, you're not going to know how it works, and then neither is the AI, and you're going to be screwed. So it's really good that you know these foundational blocks. However, I would say that especially with CSS, just because there's so much, you definitely can use AI to your advantage by saying, in this example right here, how would I create a link to another site? And then it would give you a bunch of information. Okay, you're going to use the A element, the anchor element, and then whatever your site is, you're going to put it here. because this isn't things where it's really doing the work for you. It's just how are you supposed to know what element to use if you haven't done it before, you know? So that's the type of thing I would tell you to do. Don't just go and say, hey, I want you to write my website for me. This is all I want in it, blah, blah, blah. That's what can really harm you because you don't really know what's going in your page. Just wanted to touch on that real quick because AI is a very helpful tool. So definitely take advantage of it if you can. Now we get into React. So what I have been running in this whole time is React, and it utilizes what looks like HTML by using JSX, which is called JavaScript XML. We don't really need to get that much into it, but it basically just allows you to write and return in your JavaScript function HTML code, pretty much. That's how you should think about it, and that's how it pretty much works. So as we can see here, all of this is within the app function, which is kind of weird because that's not how normal HTML is. You don't really have a function. It's just you have a file and it gets parsed and then it displays a web page. But with this, it actually returns something. So our app function returns a bunch of HTML code. And this is just what really is the core of React and how it works. And so pretty much React is a component-based architecture. So if we go back real quick, this app function is what we like to call a component. And I'll get into that in the next couple of slides. But pretty much when you're returning some sort of HTML code, you're going to call it a component. Okay. And then, yeah, so React has a component-based architecture. So a lot of times you're going to be putting a lot of components together. And think of components as a bunch of HTML elements combined into one React component. That's how I'd say it. So because of this, you can have really reusable code, and it allows for really easy readability. So imagine if you have this, let's say you want to have the code for some sort of image, right? Or some sort of, I don't know, let's say a card, and the card has a title and then it has a paragraph and it has an image on it, but you want to actually display the same card over and over again. If you were doing this in basic HTML, you would have to take these however many lines of code that show one card and copy paste it, copy paste it, copy paste it, copy paste it, and then just have that, and it would fill up your file really quickly. However, the point of React is that, okay, let's say I want to make this a lot more readable. We just have this, okay, we'll use the app div, for example, or the app component, for example. We put these 6 lines or whatever of code into our app component. And then we can now just place our app component when we want it rendered. And that is only one line of code. We use it just like an HTML element, but it's just one line of code, and it makes it really readable. It's kind of like just having a function if you're coding in another language, instead of just copy and pasting the code that the function does. It's just like having a one function call that makes it really simple. Okay, so now we're going to get into how React displays your page. So in the handout that I gave you all, I hope you guys were able to install Node.js and VS Code and then start your React app, just because we will be doing stuff with that later today. But if you go into that code, which I will now, where is it? Okay. So if we go into that code, all right. So this is the create React app code. So this is exactly what you guys have. I'm just going through it with you. Okay. Okay, so here is the create React app. Here's a create React app function, or as we have here, it's an arrow function. We don't really need to get much into that. Just think of the const app equals this as being a function. It's kind of out of the scope of what we're going over right now. But it has some sort of code that it wants to return. So we have, our div, and then we have an image. I'll actually just load it up just to show you guys what it looks like. Oh, of course, it's not working. I don't know. I'll figure this out after. It's not that important. But pretty much, we are going to look in the index.js file, and this is where our page really gets rendered. So we see this comes preloaded. I didn't do any of this, but it just has a React strict node or strict mode, and then it has our app component inside of it. As we can see, this looks a lot like an HTML element, but it's just our one app component that holds a bunch of HTML code. So if we think about this, so this app component is used to display our whole page. However, you can also use more components to display parts of your page. So if you have a function like our app function, you can include a bunch of other components inside of it that have a bunch of HTML code, and it makes it a lot more easy to read. And this is kind of one of the biggest features of React that makes it really nice to use. So this is just how in the index.js, this is just how the page actually gets rendered. Okay, so yeah, we went over our app component. And then one important thing that is in our app component is that we have the export default app at the bottom. This is what actually makes it a component and available to use in other files or in the same file in a different function. So this is just what makes it an actual component that we can later render. So if you see here, we then imported our app component from, and then ./app just means the dot just means the same file, and then or the same folder that I'm in /app. So this is just how we render this app component. Okay, so now we're getting to kind of the big thing, and that's going to be CSS. So in my experience, I have used a lot of CSS, and it's kind of what takes the most time when I'm developing. So this is just going to be how you want to actually format your page, style your page, make it look a certain way. And so I'm just going to be going over a quick example, because this is kind of going to be how you're going to format your page and really just make it look good, and not just make it look like this, because if we're being real, no one wants to look at this type of text. Before I move on to that, does anyone else have any clarifying questions about what we just went over with HTML? I know it's a lot. Don't be afraid to ask. I'll happily go back and explain more, or if you just want to get a look at it, just let me know. Okay, because no one had any questions, we can move on to our CSS layout example. So I'm just going to do a simple explanation of how, if you wanted to create a page that looks like this, so where you have a title at the top, and then a list on the left side, an image on the right side, and then a little grid layout at the bottom. So as we can see here, the list, the line between the list and the image is a little bit off-centered, but I'll be showing you guys all of this and how it works. So going back to my code, okay. All right, so this is what I have now. Okay, so I'm really going to try to go through this one and break it down. So we can just start with the top. Good. All right. So first of all, we want to have our title. So if we go back to this file, we're just going to have this example CSS as I loaded it in using H1. It's going to have the H1 text. But then right now we have no actual CSS applied to it. So I'm going back to my CSS file. And if we just see this title div, okay. So now that I added the CSS to this, so we see that our div with the ID of title div is, it holds h1, which is just our header one, and then the title example CSS. So that's just gonna be our title. It goes across. If we look in my CSS file, since I'm using ID, I guess I should clarify this. ID is pretty much just means that there is only one of these. So the goal when you are developing with HTML and CSS is to have classes, which basically means that a bunch of items can use this class, can use this CSS. So you want to have reusability within your CSS. An ID, however, just means that there is only one of these. This is a specific location, a specific element. So you're going to use a hashtag in your CSS file, as we did here for title div, to specify that it's an ID. Because we wanted it in the center, we can use this text align center. This just pretty much means when we're not in some sort of styled box, which I'll get into more later, in order to align the text, you would do it by using text align center. Now, let's say I want to change this up. This text align is an example of a property in CSS. This is what they're called. So all of these where it has something and then a colon is referred to as a property. So the text align has different options. So I can also do text align right. Now, if we go back to my CSS file, then we'll just see example CSS on the right side. Let's change that back to the center, because who wants their title on the right side? And then we also have the margin. So margin, border, and padding are going to be three of the kind of things that deal with the outskirts of your specific element. So we can actually pay attention to this when we use inspect. So right now I'm saying this title div should have, all right, so right now I'm saying this title div should have a margin of 2 pixels. So that just means that if we use margin, it means that all the way around my div, I want to have a space of 2 pixels. So we see here, it is highlighted in gray what the actual div is. So pretty much we can see that there's a light space at the top where there's a little bit of space, and that's because we have our margin of 2 pixels. Now, if I got rid of this, comment this out. Oh, wait, no, I forgot to touch on something. So basically, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here. Basically, CSS is going to have some default, or HTML is going to have some default CSS, which includes a margin for the body. So the body is just where our actual code is located. We can look at this again in the inspect. And so we see the head basically just contains some information about our file, some meta information, but the body is what actually includes our real code that is seen. So then pretty much in HTML, it includes a default margin around it. And we can look down here when we see, or if I'm on styles, we can look down here and see that there's a default margin around this specific div. And that's just because that's how HTML works. You can turn this off by doing this and saying, I don't want any margin or padding on in my file. And then now it will get rid of it. So if we look, that margin that was gone, pretty much just it disappeared because we have the body, comma HTML has 0 margin and 0 padding. And then, sorry, I didn't get to it. I saw we had a hand raised in the chat. Is that correct? Sorry, I can't really
I
see
have
you
a
guys.
question.
Yeah, what's up?
So for margins, so that just meaning it takes away 2 pixels, removes the title box 2 pixels away from every edge of the screen, correct?
Yeah, so with margin, it can either be the edge of the screen, which it gives that margin, or it can be from another element, which we'll see soon. So if we have, a 2 pixel margin, it just means that the overall size of this element includes those 2 pixels, but everything that we've written to be displayed in the element will just be 2 pixels inside that box. So if I go ahead and actually add the 2 pixels back, let me go ahead and do that right here. Then we can see there's a very, very small space, 2 pixels. I actually might just make that bigger just for the sake of you guys can see it. So I made the margin 8 pixels now. Pretty much, if we go into our inspect as well, which is really helpful for me because sometimes all the CSS can be really confusing to me. So this is how you can actually see what CSS is really applied. So I clicked on my title div, and then we go down to the styles like I was showing you earlier, and it shows you kind of a nice little diagram of the sizing of your element. So right here, we have the actual size of the element, and then the padding, border, and then margin. And this margin is highlighted in the orange. And then if we were just to look at the whole element, the margin's highlighted orange, and then the actual content of our element is highlighted in the blue. Sorry, I know I kind of over-explained that, but it was a good question.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other questions on what we've done so far? I know we're moving at a fast pace. We got to kind of cram all this in. So don't be afraid. Okay. Moving on to the next part. Oh, and then we also have the background color, which I set as Gainsborough because it was one of the first ones that popped up and I thought it sounded cool. So just to show you guys, that's how we have this gray background by using the background color property. All right. So then if we go back to the slide, we've taken care of the title. Now we want to have a list on the left side and an image on the right side. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to note earlier, so I'll go ahead and show you guys what it looks like. Okay. So now we have our list on the left side and then image on the right side. And I just wanted to ask a question. I don't know if you guys saw the code. Does anyone know what, or I guess, you know what? I'm not even gonna ask that question because it's probably too hard. But just I was gonna say, basically, we used the concept of having an outside container with div. So this is just gonna be our mid div, just showing the mid section. And then we have 2 more containers inside of it called the left div and the right div. Now I actually got my left and right correct this time. But yeah, so our left div is gonna have a certain CSS to it, and then our right div is also going to have a certain CSS to it. And I'm also using the ID again. So pretty much we have our mid div. So if we inspect again, I'll make this a little bigger. So the mid div is just this full mid section right here. So this is going to be our big container, which we want to hold 2 smaller containers. When you're writing your code, this is a really good practice. It just keeps everything compartmentalized. You can kind of know, oh, this is my mid div, go into my mid div, go into this div. It's just really good practice to use a bigger container to store smaller containers. And then we have our left div. So I will go back to the file and then see that our left div, basically this UL element is just, it's just for unordered list. That's what UL means. So then with an unordered list, you can hold things that are called list items, LI. With these list items, you just go off and put whatever you'd like, and then it'll have a little bullet point, and then you can style these again later. for my styling, we just had, I wanted to make a margin on my left div, set a specific width. But I think the real important part here is the display : flex. So display is going to be a very big part of formatting your page. Flex basically just means flexible box layout. And the default for that is a row layout. So you can change this if you like, but the most common is a row layout. So I just want to show you guys what it looked like if we didn't have this. Of course, this doesn't want to be nice to me. I'll just take it out. Okay, so if we didn't have this, like I said earlier, it just goes in block levels. So if we look, we have our mid div is now way longer because the divs inside of it aren't in flex. So yeah, if we have our mid div, we look at our left div, that is put at one level, and then the right div is then put at another level. This is the default CSS styling for HTML. So you have to actually go in and change the formatting. So then this is what I did with the mid div. We have a flex, they call it a flex box. And the default is just a row layout. So it starts on the left and then it just starts adding things on the right while it can still fit on that row. And then we look at our left div. Also, one of the more important ones is width. So with the width, pretty much you're going to want to you can set a percentage, you can set a pixel amount. So let's say I just say, I don't want it to do 35% of my screen. I want it to do 200 pixels of my screen. Then we go back and look, and it's much smaller. And because it's a flex box, this image also shifts over with it because it just goes from left to right in a row format. We'll put this back. And I wanted to make a quick comment on the percentages. So with percentages, pretty much it doesn't mean 35% of your screen. It means 35% of whatever the parent container is. So in this specific case, it would be 35% of mid div. The only reason why it actually shows 35% of the screen is because mid div spans the whole width of the page. However, if I wanted mid div to be smaller, then it would also make the left div smaller, at least if I'm doing things right. And yeah, so percentages just means the percent of my parent container. And since left div is located inside of mid div, we're going to use 35% of mid div's width. Right. And then next up, we have the right div. Pretty much our right div is going to have a 65% width, of course, 100% minus 35%, 60%, or 65%. And then we just want to text align center because I just want to align my puppy in the middle. And then a background color of gray just to show you guys. And then we have a margin left of 2 pixels. So that just means that we're only going to have the margin on the left side. And I can show you guys that right here. Basically, if we go and click on our right div, go down to style, we can see that there's only a 2 pixel margin on the left side. So you can do this for margin left, margin right, margin top, margin bottom. I don't expect you guys to memorize this all, by the way. I know it's very fast, but that's why you're going to use the web to kind of help you, remember or help you learn all this stuff. And then, okay. Next up, I also wanted to comment on the fact that you can add CSS styling for a certain type of HTML element. So this doesn't have to be just a class that we designated or an ID that we designated as the coder. This can be an element. So right here, I'm saying that I want it's called a selector. And I'm saying I want to select all list items, which is what the LI is. If we go back here, I want all of my list items to have a certain font size. And you can do this for any HTML element. However, it can be quite dangerous because let's say I have a huge project that has a bunch of CSS files and a bunch of HTML or a bunch of JS files, whatever. if I want to make a list and I imported that CSS file, then that CSS file will include or will affect all of the list items, even if I don't want them to, as long as I have it imported. So there's a lot of times where people run into problems where at a way earlier point, they said, oh, I want all my list items to have a font size of 40 pixels. But then they forgot they did that. It's lost in endless CSS files. And then now your font size for your list item is 40 pixels and you have no idea why. So this can be very dangerous. It's definitely just better to do it the other way. But I just want to show you guys because I might as well show you. I'm teaching you all this. But yeah, can be dangerous. Okay. So we've gotten through the list or using a flex box to show image or store things on left and right. Anyone have any questions about how this works?
Sorry, can you explain a little bit more on the difference between ID and class?
Yeah, of course. Okay. So pretty much, I can just do a simple, or I can maybe make a simple, or I'll explain and you let me know if this is good enough. So pretty much, an ID. So if I have a bunch of okay, here's how I'll do it. I'll make a new class, called, I don't know, list item. Cool. And let's say I want all of these to be red. I know I could just use the li like I just showed you guys, but just for the sake of this project or for this example, I'm making a whole separate class. Let me just do this real quick. And also when you are using a class and you want to specify the CSS for it, it's going to be dot instead of a hashtag. So class means dot, and then ID means a hashtag or a pound or whatever you want to call it. And then I'll just say color blue. Okay. So there we go. Okay. So right now I use a class because I want a bunch of items to have this specific styling. So that's why I made a class instead of an ID. With an ID, it just means that this is the only thing that has this styling. So it's like, if I have this title div, I'm not going to have another title div, so I can use an ID there. However, if you're making a styling for something that's very reusable, like this one is, the list item class is, you can use a class name because you just want, or you can just use a class because you want to repeat that specific styling on a bunch of HTML elements. Does that make sense?
In this example, if I switch the title div to a class, it should still work, right?
Oh yeah, sorry. I should elaborate on that. That would work perfectly fine. A lot of times people just stray away from even using IDs because they can also be problematic, and it's just better to use classes. You'll hear that. You'd much rather just use a bunch of classes. You can absolutely do this perfectly fine. There's no problems with it. It's just I used IDs just for the sake of showing you guys what IDs are, and I don't know why. I just have a habit of going ID. So yeah, but classes would work perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anyone else have any other questions? It could be on this stuff, earlier stuff. Do you guys feel like you're understanding this? You need a little more explanation?
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
For the display you mentioned about flex, are there different types, and have you used different types of display methods for CSS?
Yeah, so this display property is just it has a bunch of different properties. So I'm actually going to show you one right up next. Or sorry, that was not the right way of saying it. The display property has a bunch of different options. Where is it? Yeah, so basically I'm saying I want this container, or I'm this container. Mid div, I'm a big container. I'm holding a bunch of things in it. Flex is just one of the options that I can use to display my items that I have. So with this one, the mid div, it only has 2 items. It just wants to display one on the left, one on the right. So we're going to use the flex. This is definitely one of the most popular ones. You'll also see grid, which is a very popular one, which is up next. And as you may, it sounds, it makes a grid, and I'm going to go over that right after this. But does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, please, guys, I love the questions. I'm not a professional lecturer or anything like that. So just let me know if you have any more questions, and I'd be happy to go over them. Or if you want me to go back, happy to go back. Okay. So far we've done list, or our title, our list, and our image. And we did list and image by using a flexbox, or also known as the display flex property. And next up we have a grid. So let's say, for this example, I'm going to use a bunch of pictures of the UCLA logo because woohoo, UCLA. So we see here, I know it's not the best because I kind of have to squeeze it in, but we have a grid of items that displays a bunch of UCLA logos. So we can do this by doing what Yenelet just said. Hopefully I said that right. I don't want to butcher your name. But pretty much we have our div with the ID grid div. And you know what, just for the sake of doing it, I'm going to change it to class name because it would also work. Just do that now. And then you just have to make sure if you change to a class, you use a dot instead of a hashtag. And yeah, I'll even refresh the page. It looks exactly the same. We're all good. Pretty much with this grid div, I said I wanted a margin top of 2 pixels. So yeah, we have this little tiny margin right here. I don't know if you guys can even see, but that is our 2 pixels, and I'm using the margin top property. Now we say display grid. Now the default display for grid is to use 1 column. So I'm going to get rid of this line. I'll show you guys it after again. But pretty much, if we didn't have that line, the default for grid is just 1 column. So just, shows a bunch of UCLA logos all in 1 exact column. However, to split it up into multiple rows or multiple columns, we can use the grid template columns. I really have only used repeat. I don't really find myself making too many grids. But repeat just means that we want 4 columns, and it works out the spacing automatically. And I could change this to 3 as well. And if we go back, now there's 3 columns, and it changes out the spacing automatically. We can see the spacing in between them, changes a little bit, and it keeps those 3 columns even if it outgrows the size of the page. So then now we have this little sidebar at the bottom. Might not be exactly what you wanted, but there are more options. I'm not going to cover all of them, nor do I even know all of them. Sorry, I just have one more. I have one question in the chat that I just saw. It's asking, so ID is more permanent. So the ID doesn't necessarily mean that it's more permanent. It just means like you can change this at any time. So like I just did now, I went from the ID equals grid div to the class name equals grid div, and it really does the same thing. However, ID, it's more of just a styling thing. It's just saying this is the only element, and it's used, like, for example, when I did the anchor earlier, yes, right here. So if you want to, I'm sure you guys have seen in websites before where you click on a certain button and then it just brings you down to the bottom of the page. This is done using an anchor to a specific spot in your website. They have a better transition. They put a lot more effort into the CSS than the one I showed you earlier. But for this, you needed a ID, because let's say that we have a class name or a class, and we wanted to anchor to that class. That just wouldn't work because there could be multiple items of that class. So then the page wouldn't know, okay, I need to go to this exact spot where this ID is. It's just saying that an ID is just saying this is the exact element that has this ID. There's no other people that have this ID, unlike classes where a bunch of different elements can have the same ID. Does that make sense? I'm gonna go with yes. We're gonna move on. Okay. So yeah, resuming with the grid div. Sorry, I got caught. I just saw the question right there in the chat. Thank you for asking, by the way. You can change the number of columns by using this grid template columns, and then colon repeat, and then you can put however many columns you want. I'm gonna go with 4. And then I just said I didn't even want the width to be the full thing, so we can see the width is 95%. And then as the width is 95%, there are these little spaces on the edge. However, this div is not automatically centered in the middle. I'm using this margin 0 auto. It pretty much just makes it so the margin is like the same on both sides, I guess is the right way of putting it. And that just centers it. It's just one of the ways of centering it. And then now I bring to the align items and then justify items. So align items, I know it's kind of confusing with the text align earlier. Honestly, I still don't fully understand it because it works in some cases, doesn't work in other cases. But from my understanding, you can use align items and justify items when you are using some sort of display. So whether it's a flex or a grid, basically the align items, it just aligns the items vertically in some way. I have it in the center because I want my images to be in the center of each grid box. So I will examine a little more. If we see with the grid, I don't know if you guys can see it clearly, but there are little dotted lines in between each element of the grid. And that just shows you that the grid is broken up into 8 separate boxes. And then within that box, we have our image. Now, in order for the image to be centered within its respective box, we had to use, or vertically and horizontally, we had to use the align items center and justify items center. Okay, does that make sense? The align items and justify items, because it's not centering it on the page, it's just only centering it within its grid box. And I'll show you what would happen if we didn't have that. Let me just take this out. Okay, now we can see that it's not actually centered in the middle. So if we look at our grid box again, it's shifted to the left side. So we really needed that justify content center. Like I was saying, oops, gone, but I'll add it again. Or justify items, sorry. So we really needed this in order to actually have it centered in the middle of our grid. So yeah, this was just a basic example of some CSS, some layout for CSS. I think, here, let me see. Oh yes, I also did want to comment on the inline styling. So I'm going to, as long as there's no more questions on this example, I'm going to move on to the next one. Does anyone have any questions on how I did this? If it makes sense or anything?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Sorry guys that I've been talking so much. We do have an activity coming up that will last for the rest of class, where you guys are actually going to be coding, but we're almost done. So next up, just last thing for today, I just wanted to show you guys the inline styling example. So it's not really recommended, like I was saying. However, you definitely can take advantage of it if you'd like. So I'm just going to comment out all of this stuff. By the way, I'm doing this large group of commenting by doing command backslash instead of having to go through and comment each one. It just makes it really, I just like doing it that way. But yeah, that's how I'm commenting it out. And then this is just an example for some inline styling. So pretty much I'm just doing a really simple div that contains an H1 and then which is our largest header, and then a P, which is just a paragraph. I see a question in the chat. And then pretty much the H1 is styled with inline. So if we see here, we have 2 curly brackets. This is just the syntax for inline styling. But then it contains our background color and our font size. Now, the thing with doing it in React is it has a little bit of a different syntax. So, and this is also, I didn't point this out earlier, but it's the same thing with classes. So I'll show this first and then I'll show the classes after. But in CSS, pretty much everything is just, it's all lowercase, and then any word any words are just separated by a hyphen. So right here we have background dash color, and then you see like margin dash top, all of that. In React, when you are returning your HTML element with the inline style, it actually does it in camel case. So we're going to have a lowercase first letter, but then instead of having background dash color, it's background uppercase color. This is just because in JavaScript, camel case is the convention for naming, but it still does the exact same thing as if I was to do a background dash color in a CSS file, but it's just how it's done. So if I show you guys, we have our background color is yellow and our font size is 24 pixels. And then with the paragraph, our background or our color, so this is our text color, is blue, and our padding is 10 pixels. So as we can see here, it has all of the correct styling. It's just done with a little bit of different syntax. And then, yeah. And then I also wanted to mention on classes, in default HTML, if you were writing your website in an HTML document, it would be no name. It would just be class equals blank. For some reason in React, they have class name. Don't ask me why, but that's just a little bit of a difference. But yeah, I actually wanted to comment a little more just on as I'm going through, I'm just realizing right now, I want to comment a little bit more on margin, border, and padding, because this was a little bit confusing for me at the start. Okay. So right here, if I'm going in, so we have our H1 element, and this just means that we have, and we don't have any margin on it when we did it in our inline styling. So we see here, there's just a bunch of dashes, which just means no padding, border, or margin. But then on this one, I added some padding. So the padding is a little bit different than the margin. So it's really the border. If I show a border, which I will do now, actually, let me see. I don't even remember the inline syntax, to be honest. I'm just going to do this. God, I'm forgetting how to do a border. See, this guys, this is what I mean when I say there's so much freaking CSS out there that I don't even remember how to do half the stuff, so I have to look it up when I'm doing it. But here, I'm just gonna look it up real quick because I want to show you guys. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. So now we can see that we have a border, and this is just basically it goes margin is on the outside, and then border, and then padding. So I'm gonna add a margin too. Why not? Because then I can show you all three. Why is this not working? Oh, this is why. Okay, here we go. That was an example, literally what I was just telling you guys about, where in another CSS file that I have for another, I have P, and then I set the margin to 0. So then this just pretty much overwrite. Oh my god, how would you say that? Overwrite my CSS in my new file, which says I wanted a margin of 8 pixels on all of my paragraphs, which, luckily I knew that could happen, but if you didn't, that could cause you a lot of trouble and a lot of pain. So then, yeah, so we can go more in depth on the margin, border, and padding. So we can see here, the margin is just what is outside of a border. If you don't have a border, it's going to be very similar to how padding works. But when you do have a border, it's really where it makes a difference. So I just want to say that the border is inside of the margin. And then we also have padding inside of the border. So then if you wanted to just have an outside border that has a lot of space until the middle, you use padding. However, if you wanted a more tight border around your element with a lot of space around it, then you use a margin and things like that. So I remember when I was first starting, I never knew what the difference was, but then I watched a really good video and explained this. So I feel like that's an important point. All right. But yeah, back to my original point with inline styling, this is how you do it. Okay. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, I'm just going to click on this list just to show you guys, but there's a lot of CSS properties. So, color, for example, is a property, display is a property. This is the list of possible properties that you can use. Now, are all of them used frequently? No, but it's just, there's a lot of things, a lot that you can use. So I do not blame you at all if you want to use some sort of AI to ask what to use. Like I said, don't ask it to do your whole project for you, but you can definitely ask it what to use because there's a lot to learn, and just to use in general. So yeah, definitely take advantage of the web. There's a lot of websites, there's a lot of videos on how to do stuff, because it'll really help you just accelerate your learning. There's no point of just struggling through it and just wondering why it doesn't work. Yeah, so before our activity, I wanted to ask, was there anyone that had, I know a couple of you guys reached out to me with a couple problems with installing Node, getting Visual Studio Code ready, and running your first React app. Did anyone have any problems with that? Wanted to talk to me about it? Because we're about to use all of those tools in an activity. So I want you guys to be able to, actually do it. I guess I'll rephrase that and say, was everybody able to get React running?
Right now I'm trying to I was following the README and I checked the windows. It says it's installed. The Node V and the npm v. I made sure they were installed. Then it says go on your desktop, make a folder. I made a folder. And I went to Visual Studio Code. I did the terminal npx create React app project name. That's where I get like this error.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm stuck there.
Okay. Here, with the error, when we start the activity, I'll stay and talk with you about it if you're cool with that. With specific things. Other than that, were most people able to kind of get it running? Because if so, we are going to start our activity, which you will have the rest of class for. I'm gonna put you guys out into breakout rooms. And we are going to be trying to build a personal website So I know it's very basic. However, it's definitely a good thing to have because it allows you to kind of go more in depth about sharing your life and your professional journey. Also, it shows off your coding skills. So what you've learned today, and I know you're not going to know everything, but kind of how I like to learn, and I think the best way of learning is getting your feet wet and getting in there and actually trying it. Use everything you can on the web, but I really think, and we're gonna set you out in the breakout room. So I want you guys to be able to collaborate. Ask questions if you're confused. I'll be bouncing around trying to answer questions as I can. But yeah, I want you guys to be able to include a picture of yourself, a couple links, maybe an about me, and then spend some time trying to make it look good. Just because you really can show this off to a recruiter, and you can talk about your experience and what you know. So yeah, we are going to take a 10-minute break before the activity begins. But that's just what we're going to be doing for the rest of class when we get back. So yeah, we'll be back. I'm going to stop recording right now because I don't really think we need to record all the breakout rooms. But yeah, basically we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then I'll return at 7:52 and try to get you guys into breakout rooms, and then we can start working on our project. Any questions before? I'll be around during the break, but any questions before we go? I think we gotta still. Oh, wait. Is that everyone? Oh, wait, so.
Yeah, looks like the breakout rooms
There we
are
go.
closed.
There we go. Cool. I'll join. All right, so looks like we're all finished up for today. I know it was very fast. Don't got too much time, so I'm just trying to cram stuff in and challenge you guys a little bit. Hopefully you guys got some good work done. So yeah, today we were able to go over some HTML, CSS, and just the basics of React, web development using React. I'm hoping you guys were able to kind of get a feel for how it all worked. And if not, we'll also be doing more tomorrow. But yeah, hopefully you guys got a dent in your personal site. This is just for your practice and for your gain. So yeah, keep working on them if you haven't finished them, and good job.
Ryan, can you put the feedback survey into the chat, please?
Yes. Hold on one second.
So I want to congratulate everybody on getting through your first workshop. And I wanted to see if anybody might be willing to share something that they struggled with tonight. It can be anything.
I struggled to get it started, but I got it started at the end. I got the server up.
Okay. So you had a hard time getting the server to work.
Yeah, I have everything. Now I gotta tinker it.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to share something that was challenging this evening?
I mean, I think just like I have zero experience with JavaScript or any of this stuff, so literally just learning how to paste my name, that was a challenge, and I was able to actually do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're going to find is that some of the things that we're going to teach you might be a challenge, right? But that's the whole point of these workshops, right? Is to kind of work through them. And the reason why I'm asking for this feedback from all of you is it helps us to know where you all are at. But I think we want to create an environment within our courses that this is a safe space, right? And so you should be asking questions, no matter how ridiculous you think it seems, right? This is a safe space for everyone, right? To kind of talk about the things that you're struggling with or ideas that you may have. Okay. And I do want to start building up this kind of behavior that we're helping one another, right? And that means the mentors are helping you, but you're also helping the mentors, right? You're helping each other, because as engineers, it's always a team sport, right? You're going to need to work with others, both in the classroom as well as on projects that you get involved with. And so, let's kind of build some muscle memory around, that sort of behavior, is that we're here to move forward together. Okay. And so I just want to say great job. I know these things can be tough, says the non-engineer in the room. And so congratulations for making it through, and look forward to some additional stuff in the next days. And I want to say thank you to Ryan, if you can help me to give him a round of applause for being our first workshop presenter this evening. First is always the most challenging and intimidating. So Ryan, thank you for setting the pace this evening. Ryan put into the chat the feedback survey. We do need to hear from you all as a mechanism to improve. We will look at them like sort of in situ, right? So as we're doing the workshops, we're going to be looking at some of the feedback you're giving, so that we can kind of get a sense of where you all are at. And again, it's very important, for me to go and request funding when we can know that these workshops are doing something for you all. Okay, so please help us if you fill out that feedback survey. And otherwise, it's 9 o'clock, so I'm going to say good night. I will stick around for a few minutes if there's any questions. The last thing that I want to say is I sent all of the participants who are participating remotely in Hack an email, because we have a very short window of time to get you your parts for Hack. And unfortunately, it means that we don't have the time to mail them to you, and I'm going to have to get in a car and drive across the state of California. Okay. And so I need your help to be flexible, with receiving your parts on the days that I can come and drop them off. Okay. So check your email, because if I sent one to you this evening, if you are a remote participant. Those of you who are participating in person, you will come to Hack and get your parts. And so you don't have to worry about receiving your parts. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question.